Hey guys, welcome back. It's Ripe again, back with more Karen's stories. In this video, we have two stories about cops totally overstepping their boundaries and then failing spectacularly. Let's dive right into the video to find out what happened. So I live in a quiet, upscale suburban neighborhood. I'm a lawyer and I work long hours a lot and wanted my home to be an oasis for my downtime. My job can be stressful and I wanted to be able to relax. I make enough to be able to afford a few luxuries, so recently I had a beautiful in-ground pool installed. And well, I splurged a little and paid for an amazing landscaping company to come in and make things look pretty. There's lots of shrubs and plants growing in the yard, and I had a waterfall feature installed. Since I deal with a lot of different sorts of clients, I also wanted to feel safe should anyone happen to get my home address. They should not, but these days you never know what might happen. So I had a high-tech security camera system installed, including cameras that cover every angle of my property. I like my privacy, and that's one of the reasons why I chose to live outside of the city. It's also one of the reasons why there's a fence around my property, and the other one is that there are regulations for having an in-ground pool to prevent children from accidentally falling into the pool if they wander over and decide to go for a swim. I keep to myself and I don't interact a lot with the people in the neighborhood. It's not that I'm antisocial, I have friends. It's just that it is rare that I get to stay home and not rush to a meeting, conference or into court. Anyway, sometimes I just need to disconnect from the outside world and recharge for my own sanity and productivity. My neighbor has a yard that connects to mine and only separates us by the fence. It is Karen, a stay-at-home mom. She is your typical nosy neighbor, always wanting to know everyone else's business. I chalk this up to her being busy with the kids at home and not getting out much. I've always been cordial when we meet outside if we are picking up the mail at the same time or anything like that, but I don't let her talk me into anything. She's always trying to gossip about one of the other neighbors. I expect that she would like me to partake so that then she can go and say, "Mary said XYZ." Well, Karen's husband is Bob. Bob is one of our town's local cops. There's not a lot of crime that happens in our town other than an occasional parking violation, and occasionally someone fills up their car at the local gas station and then drives away without paying. So whenever he can wield some authority, he does. I know that they've been looking at my pool with envy ever since I got it installed. However, it is not my fault that I can afford to have nice things. I've worked plenty hard to get them. So now that you know a little about me and my neighbors, let's get to the crazy thing that happened lately. It was a scorching hot Saturday and I was home from work. I was sitting outside, lounging by the pool, reading a book in the shade of my sun umbrella, letting my feet swirl around in the water when Karen poked her head over the fence. "Hey Mary," she said, "it's a hot day and I know that the lineups at the public pool will be atrocious today. The kids are driving me squirrely from this heat. They really want me to take them for a swim, but I don't want to head out in the crowds." I knew that Karen was hinting that I should invite her and the kids over to enjoy their day in my pool. But honestly, I did not want 3 kids and their moms splashing around in my pool, interrupting my peace and quiet. "Sorry, Karen," I replied, "but I've had a long week at work and today I'm just trying to enjoy some quiet time by myself." "Just for an hour, Mary," pleaded Karen. "Please, I need this. The kids need this. You are not even in the pool right now." "No," I replied. "I'm sorry, but if you and the kids want to swim, you will have to go to the public pool. I just want to relax today." Karen did not like what I had to say, and so she proceeded to have a little tantrum standing over my fence. She yelled at me that I was being selfish and unneighborly. Being a lawyer, I've seen my fair share of this kind of behavior in the courtroom, and I'm not easily fazed by it. I tried ignoring her, and when that did not work, I stood up to head into the house, figuring that she would head back into hers and then the whole thing would be done, and that Karen could head on down the road and gossip about me if she wanted. That was when Karen yelled, "You're being aggressive and unreasonable. You're abusing me and my children by preventing us to have the right to cool off. I'm gonna call the cops on you." I ignored Karen, figuring it was just an empty threat. I headed inside and settled onto the couch with my book. I have air conditioning in the house, so even though I could not currently enjoy my beautiful backyard, I could at least stay cool and try to relax despite the fact that Karen's behavior had thrown an uneasiness into my day. 30 minutes later, there was a knock at my door. It was Karen's husband, Officer Bob. He was in full uniform, and before I even got up to answer the first knock on the door, he had been pounding on it, shouting that I had to open it up as it was the police. I opened the door, not because I wanted to, but because even though I had done nothing wrong, Officer Bob was the police, and not opening the door could make things a whole lot worse. I'm here because I got a report that you were disturbing the peace with your unreasonable behavior. However, I think I could be persuaded to let the incidents go just this once if you allow Karen and the kids to use the pool for the afternoon," said Bob. "No way," I said, calmly standing my ground, just like I would if I was facing a courtroom. "I don't have to do that. You're using your badge to make demands which are not lawful. You're currently trespassing. I want you off my property right now." "I could arrest you right now," said Bob, "and I could fine you too. How much of your time and money do you want to waste with this?" "Well, do you really want to waste your time with this?" I asked. "Did you forget that I'm a lawyer? I'm just as aware of the law as you are, and you're currently breaking it. How about you leave before I make some calls to your supervisors? You, your wife and your children are not gonna be using my pool today. And after this stunt that you and your wife have pulled, you definitely won't ever be getting an invitation." "Look, lady," said Bob, "you don't really want me to have to arrest you and take you downtown in my squad car, do you? Especially not today because the air conditioning is broken and the car stinks of rotten eggs." "I don't care what your car smells like," I replied. "Your intimidation tactics are not gonna work on me. You're threatening me with something that will never stand up in court. If you arrest me, I will sue you." "You wouldn't dare," said Officer Bob. "You don't have the guts to sue me. I'm a well-respected cop." "Well, maybe in this small town with the people you have pushed around since you got your badge," I replied. "But I did not get just out of law school yesterday. I will not be bullied by you. I know that I've done nothing to deserve this kind of behavior." Bob and I argued for a few minutes longer and finally he left. I headed back inside, but I couldn't just sit down and relax. Bob's showing up and using his authority in such a way had really angered me, and I knew that if I didn't do something about it, that he and Karen would probably find other ways to make my life miserable. They would at least never let me enjoy being outside in my own backyard again that I'd paid for by myself. I had recorded my conversation with Bob and I decided to review the security camera footage to see what they picked up. Well, it turned out they had recorded everything too, so I had enough evidence to use to make a formal complaint against Bob. I knew he would not be expecting that. It only took a few days before I heard back from the head of the town's police department regarding my complaint about Bob abusing his powers as an officer and harassing me. The story even made it onto the news. I don't know who leaked it from the inside, but I also did not care. The video ended up going viral after the story gained traction. That had not been my purpose, but sometimes karma has its own way of dealing with things. Either way, Bob ended up being suspended from the force and then fired completely. Perhaps I should have felt a bit bad about ending a man's career, but the lawyer in me knew that he had brought that upon himself. And I could not help but wonder how many other occasions he had headed out to see a neighbor because of something that Karen had wanted but couldn't have. In town, Bob let it slip that he had only come calling at my house trying to get me to listen to reason so that he could be a good husband and father. This only made him and Karen the subject of gossip and ridicule in our neighborhood. With the story being public, the HOA didn't want to have any issues, so they made sure to send a formal notice to Karen regarding her bad behavior. I was grateful for the support that I had received from the community and was glad that I was going to be able to enjoy my own backyard again. I decided to throw a celebratory pool party and invited everyone in the neighborhood except for Karen, Bob and their kids. Sometimes you have to work hard for peace in your surroundings. And last night when I walked down the street to pick up my mail, I noticed that there was a for sale sign in front of Karen and Bob's house. I guess they decided that it would be better for them to leave. That suits me just fine because whether or not they are living there, I plan to enjoy my backyard and the peace that I can have in it now that I fought for justice. But there's also added satisfaction knowing that I won't have Bob or Karen or their kids peering over my fence or even looking over at me from their window because they are angry that my fight for what was right brought them to this situation where they had to learn that you cannot always have what you want and that you certainly don't get it by bullying others or abusing powers. And hold up, Ripe stars, don't go anywhere yet. This next story is wild. A small town cop goes full on jerk, picks a fight with the wrong guy, and it backfires spectacularly. It is titled Revenge on Awful Cop. And by the way, if you enjoy the cop stories, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much. So, some background, my wife inherited some property and convinced me to move there after getting an amazing job offer in her field, which is wildlife conservation. The salary matched our combined income, plus she got a management position with great benefits and an employment contract, and since we don't have kids and I'm pretty flexible, I agreed. We sold our house and moved sight unseen. Coming from my background in security consulting and tactical training, I was in for a culture shock. We're talking genuine horse and buggy territory. The house needed serious work, no indoor plumbing, just an outhouse and a hand pump. We then bought a used trailer to live in while I renovated. Being 6+ inches taller than everyone else and pale as a ghost, I stuck out like a sore thumb but eventually made friends. My wife, having spent summers there with relatives, fit right in. The area itself was great, but the surrounding counties had a growing drug problem. Break-ins, carjackings, and even kidnappings started creeping in. After a horrible incident where some seniors were killed for their medications and jewelry, I saw an opportunity to help. I bought some cheap land, contaminated soil to remote for development, and built a security training facility. I started offering advanced guard training, home defense courses, firearm certification, and security consulting. Eventually, it became the go-to trainer for police recertifications in our region. This saved them from sending officers 6 hours away for training. Most local officers are good people who understand the community. They know the history here. Corrupt cops don't last long. In the past though, the community took justice into their own hands when the system failed them. Even a former judge who got off easy after hurting kids disappeared mysteriously. The good officers make sure that newcomers understand they are here to protect people, not bully them. Now, for the story, I was covering a night shift for one of my guards when some officers stopped by to chat. They told me about this new transfer from the city who was causing problems already. Real power trip type who thought his badge made him above everyone else. He was writing tickets for ridiculous things like driving with one hand, a burned out fog light, even tried giving a DUI to someone working on their car, on blocks, in their own driveway. The other officers were worried that he would destroy the trust they had built with the community, and 2 weeks later, I met Officer Jerk myself. I usually wave at patrol cars since most officers recognize my vehicle. This guy slammed his brakes, flipped around, and came flying up behind me with lights and sirens. After I mentioned my concealed carry permit, required by law, he kept his hand on his gun the whole time while lecturing me about how 99% of people probably cannot even use one properly. Wrote me a ticket for a reckless operation because I took my hand off the wheel to wave. When I tried explaining that I was just being friendly, he lost it, got in my face, threatening to haul my smart ass self downtown, and saying that he could cost me more in impound fees than I would make in a month. I handed him my lawyer's card and told him any further contact needs to go through her. He called me a coward and told me to get lost. I was furious. As someone who's trained for years to control my emotions in high-stress situations, the fact that this guy got under my skin so quickly was concerning. He was not particularly imposing, and his aggressive behavior with his hand on his weapon showed his insecurity. I worried what might happen if he treated someone without my training this way though. First, I went to court with my dashcam footage and got the citation dismissed. Then I took the evidence to his sheriff and had a long talk. The sheriff agreed that this guy was trouble, but explained that his hands were tied, the union would fight any serious discipline, and he would probably just get some training that he would just ignore. He even warned me against filing a complaint, worried the guy might retaliate. However, then fate handed me a golden opportunity. Guess who showed up at my facility for recertification? He swaggered in like he owned the place, complaining about how this was bureaucratic nonsense and a waste of time. The moment of recognition when I reminded him of our last meeting was priceless. He tried to brush it off as going by the book and claimed that he only acted that way because me carrying a weapon made him nervous and he needed to assert his authority. Well, before his test, he asked to use my range for practice. I waived the fee just to watch. At 10 yards, he fired 17 rounds rapid fire and only hit the target 5 times with just 1 in center mass. His best score was at 5 yards to 10 hits with 4 center mass. When I offered advice, he told me he had forgotten more than I'd ever know. Then he shot 1 at a time at 10 yards and could not hit center mass once. After seeing a 13-year-old girl drilling headshots at 15 yards, he mumbled something about needing his sights adjusted and left. Well, our certification standards are tough. Beyond state minimums, you have to complete 3 tests in full gear, a timed shooting drill with reload at 10 yards, a one-handed version, and a precision drill. Most officers find it challenging under pressure, so I'm usually lenient with scoring if they are close and seem like decent people who are just nervous or rusty. Well, not this time. I bought new digital calipers to measure his shot placement. If he was off by even a fraction, it would count as a miss. I was going by the book, just like he liked to do. Test day arrives and this genius shows up in shorts and a workout shirt. No vest, no duty gear, not even an eye or ear protection, just his gun and an empty belt. When I pointed this out, he says, "I brought everything that's important. Let's get this over with." I could have failed him right then and there for not following protocol, but I wanted him to fail on his own merits. I loaned him some safety gear and let him proceed. What happened next was both sad and hilarious. During the first test, he tripped and face-planted, running to position. Then, while drawing his weapon, he caught it on his holster and sent it flying through the dirt. After that automatic fail, I gave him another chance, wanting solid proof of his incompetence. He kept his gun this time, but could not clear the malfunction fast enough and barely hit the target. When I told him he failed, he exploded, started throwing accusations about the ticket incident, and punching my wall, pointing at me and my staff while saying, "I will make sure you all regret this." My regulars and staff were watching through the window by now, and when I asked if that was a threat, this genius said, "You bet you're behind it is," and tried to shove me. I then sidestepped and told him to leave my property and informed him that he had just guaranteed that he would never work as an officer again. That is when he spat at me and threw a punch. Being about 50 pounds heavier, I caught his arm and introduced him to the floor really hard. As I held him down, he started crying when he saw my range master, a 6'6", 310 pounds retired Marine, pointing our bright green training shotgun at his head while calling his boss. Well, it turns out my range master brought the less lethal weapon because he had never seen me that angry before. He told me later, "Boss, in my experience, when a quiet man like you gets that mad, even the devil would run away." He was actually planning to shoot me with a beanbag round if needed. I gave him a raise for being willing to protect others even from his own boss. Officer Jerk got arrested right there by his own boss. Despite the evidence, he got a decent plea deal, but he'll never be an officer or own firearms again. His wife left him during the court proceedings. It turns out he was abusive at home too, and last I heard he's now working at a gas station up north making minimum wage. Looking back, I'm glad I could help make our community safer. Sometimes the best revenge is just letting someone fail on their own terms, especially when they've got such a talent for it. Hey guys, welcome back, it's Ripe again. In today's video, a terrible entitled HOA Karen claims a public city pool is owned by the HOA and bans my disabled son from using it. She ends up slapping him and going crazy. Here is what happened. Let's dive right into the story. So my son has a disability called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, EDS. The basics that you need to know of this disability is that it highly affects my son's joints. It causes pain and also hypermobility, which means his joints can easily end up popping out of their sockets, which causes extreme pain. When he was about 10, he started to need a wheelchair because walking became too much for his joints. He was 12 when this story took place. It was a hot summer day and we were going to the pool for a while in order to cool off. Plus, the water is great because it is an activity where he can get out of his chair and not put pressure on his joints. To make things even better, the pool is owned by the city, which means that by law, it has to have accommodation for people like my son. Private places are supposed to have it, but the regulation checks with them can be all over the place. Before I get any further, I need to talk about an elephant in the room, or well, the pool. So there is an HOA where I live that is also close to the pool. Karen runs the HOA, and let me tell you, she is not nice or compassionate in the least. She has made it very clear to me over the years that she disagrees with my son being out and about where people can see him. Making comments about how I should not take him to the store with me, and even saying that I should put him in some hospital. And by the way guys, it seems like that is exactly where Karen belongs, and not just in some hospital, but probably a mental one. Anyway, due to this, you can imagine, I never ended up joining the HOA in fear of her getting any control over what I can and cannot do. I've kept tabs on her and noticed that some of her failed propositions for HOA laws are clearly aimed to attack people like my son. Things like getting rid of sidewalk ramps or transportation vans being an inappropriate car to have. When I saw her that day in the pool, I could only just hope and pray that she wouldn't see us or just mind her own business for once. I couldn't be that lucky, and she saw us within 10 minutes and was out of the pool and in my face. "Karen, what are you doing here?" She said "you" with such disgust I already knew this was gonna be dramatic. Me, we came for a swim. It's hot out, which I would imagine is why you came as well, right? "Karen, you know exactly what I mean. How could you bring him out here in public and make everybody uncomfortable? Besides, you don't have a right to be here anyway. Everyone else pays HOA dues and that is what keeps the pool up and running. You cannot have it both ways where you don't want to pay and then take advantage of the amenities." Me, "You don't have any right to tell me what to do or where to go. We can be here if we want to and you don't have any right to try and stop us. Karen, the HOA owns this pool and speaking on their behalf, I'm ordering you to leave. He should not be seen in public like this. He is making the entire neighborhood look ugly and people might get sick looking at him." Just a quick note that aside from being pretty skinny and having constant small bruises from the EDS, my son looks like any other kid. Me, "Actually, this pool is owned by the city. We can stay if we want and if you try and stop us, I can promise you, you will be the one going home." Karen got mad because she knew she didn't have anything over me. In response, she decided to slap my son. I did not see it coming and the after effect was not pretty. I think she was aiming to slap him in the face but missed and instead got his shoulder on a weird angle. Due to his EDS and bad luck, the entire joint popped out of the socket and my son started screaming in pain. Karen acted like she did nothing wrong and was using his screaming as another excuse that we shouldn't have been there. That my son was disabled and ruining the peace for everybody because I could not keep him under control. Also yelling about how she was banning disabled people from the HOA and by next week I was gonna be out of the neighborhood entirely. Instead of telling her how that rule would be illegal, or even that since I was not part of the HOA it would not even apply to me, I was just focused on my son. The screaming brought over lifeguards who could clearly see that he was screaming from being hit and the joint popping out. Not just for the fun of screaming like Karen was trying to suggest. One also told me that she saw Karen slap him and already called the police and an ambulance. Due to the commotion, we had a bunch of attention, and them hearing the lifeguard say she saw what Karen did started the whispers all around. Before the police could come, Karen was screaming at my son to stop yelling in pain and then yelling at me to control him. This time I could catch her trying to hit him again and got to her first. I punched her as hard as I could and she would have hit the ground if the lifeguard had not caught her. I don't condone violence, but she was not laying a finger on my son again and getting away with it. The police came and the lifeguard explained the entire situation, including why Karen was now unconscious. The police warned me that she could press charges for assault, but they probably would not stick because I was defending my son from her. I had to fill out a report, but I did that with the police at the hospital once my son got loaded in and sent to the ER. The lifeguard also gave her statement too, I assume because I saw cops talking to her also. At the ER, it was not a situation we had not dealt with before. Usually, he does not end up yelling in as much pain as he did, so I assume it was the force of the hit or him being scared that caused a huge reaction. They were also able to give him some pain medication to numb the area and pop the shoulder back into his joint. It might sound crazy to those of you reading it, but anybody that has experienced this issue with EDS is desensitized to it. I think my own joint could pop out and I would only freak out because of the pain. Getting back to Karen though, the gossip mill had been turning while all of this was getting taken care of. She was arrested when she woke up for assault because you can be damn sure I pressed charges against her. I also think anybody can guess the formula of a Karen putting a disabled kid into an ambulance not looking good in court. Especially when you consider she was not acting any different once placed on a stand or in front of a judge. Her entire argument revolved around saying we shouldn't have been there to begin with and it was our fault. And also that disabled people cannot go outside because they get hurt and then sue other people for money. This case did not even have anything to do with money, it was criminal charges against her, lack of remorse or even admitting she did anything wrong caused the judge to have zero sympathy for her. Instead of taking a plea deal that would have gotten her a year, she ended up getting 3 years because she insisted on going to court with it. And before we leave, we will read a petty revenge story. It is titled, "If I get bad service, I play the world's worst song on the jukebox and then leave." So I go to sports bars quite often to watch games and eat basic bar food. At most of the bars I go to, they have a machine on the wall where you can spend $1 to purchase a song from Apple Music and play it across the entire facility. On the Apple Music Store, there's a song called Tubular Bells Part 2. It's possibly the most rage-inducing song I've ever heard, if you would even call it a song. I have no clue how it ended up on Apple Music, but I definitely use this fact to my advantage. It's basically just some dude jamming on random instruments. It's not terrible, but the song has no real rhythm it's trying to get into and no specific beat it's trying to build off. It's like the beginning of a Pink Floyd song that just constantly builds up, and the second you think he or she is gonna get into rhythm or start jamming out, they either change instruments entirely or restart and continue playing different chords. It will literally drive you nuts if you're forced to listen to it, and the best part is it's 26 minutes long. I've been at a few bars where there was no way for the bartender or waiter to cancel the song out without flipping the breaker, powering the sound system to reboot it. I've stuck around a few times to see everyone suffer, but the last few times I've done it, I've immediately left as to not blow my cover. Last month I went to a pretty large chain sports bar that I won't name and got absolutely terrible service. The food was bad, the server came to refill our beers once in over an hour, and we had to go to the bar a few times to top off. And to make matters even worse, we got kicked out of our table after an hour and a half because apparently our table was reserved for a specific time for a ball game that came on soon. No big deal though, I get it, so we just moved to the bar. I was a bit frustrated as I've been to this place many times before and we usually get much better service. I was not mad or anything, but I was annoyed enough where I decided I was gonna make everyone's ears bleed for a little while before they shut the music down to play the ball game on the sound system across the restaurant. Seeing the visible confusion and frustration across everyone's face across the entire bar is a good way to make an okay night great. To those of you who frequent bars and restaurants with music boxes on the wall, you are welcome. Please post some star emojis in the comments if you like my content. Thank you so much, and I will see you again tomorrow.